Hello everyone, hope you're all well. So I'm going to try and do a live stream soon. I might schedule it for this evening or for tomorrow, I'm not sure yet. Um, I know this evening might be short notice, but we'll see what happens. I want to get into that again. For this video, I'll be talking about an issue that I've spoken about many times, but for me it is a very, very critical issue and it's something I feel strongly about. So I want to just offer some perspectives on what I think should happen because, it's all very well criticizing something, but without offering an alternative, that is just complaining. I think if you criticize something, you need to suggest an alternative. Um, so if I was to make a video on every criminal case that I felt was handled badly, that's all this channel would be about. The truth is, crime is kind of a depressing subject. I mean, recently I've deliberately not looked at articles because it'll say something like, father killed for standing up to teenagers, something like that. I don't even want to look at because I know it will depress me, I know it will anger me. So for the sake of my mental health, I avoid it. Um, but this is part of society, this is something we can't escape, and for that reason, I will talk about it. Um, I've made no secret of the fact that I'm conservative on crime, by which I mean I'm very much of the view that if you hurt society, you have to pay a price. A big part of that is sentencing. Now, some people might think I'm obsessed by the issue of sentencing, but I think it's a very critical issue in terms of public trust. I really do. And I am adamant that there still remains a very, very big gap between the legal establishment and the public. You know, judges, lawyers, barristers, solicitors, people in that world who train for it. They've went to the bar. They've done all. They've looked at all the legal terminology and they've been through that world. They might be thinking, well, the public complain. They don't know what we do, but they have to appreciate that the public perspective does have basis. It's not just about tabloid scaremongering. There is a basis to this. And I think any lawyer or judge out there who, really is going to say that the system always gets it right, they're kidding themselves, especially judges, because they're the profession I'm really thinking about. They cannot honestly, with a straight face, say that all their colleagues get it right. Um, Being a judge is a position of power. It's a position of responsibility, and I appreciate it's not an easy job insofar as, you're determining whether someone guilty or innocent of a serious crime, you're determining the outcome of that. So I don't say that they have an easy job, but I do say that they don't always help themselves, their reputation that is, with with overt leniency. And a very big problem, I think, is a lack of accountability. Now, again, people in the legal profession might say, well, wait a second, there is accountability from peers. But that's just the point, from peers. So, for example, if a judge is guilty of malpractice, let's say he or she flirts with a juror during a trial, let's say they're just lazy and they sleep during the trial or something like that, that sort of thing could be seen as professional misconduct. And they can be sanctioned by their bar, or their judicial circuit. But when it comes to empowerment of the public and being held to account by the public, it's pretty much non-existent. Why? For several reasons. Firstly, if you are unhappy with a judge's decision, there is a recourse which I'll go to in a minute. I don't think it's very effective, but I'll go to that in a minute. But can you contact the judge directly to express displeasure at their decision? No, you can't. Because judges, unlike elected MPs, don't have a point of contact. You try typing in the Right Honourable so and so, they won't have an email address, they won't have a web page or something. It's very, very hard to reach them. Now, people might think, oh, but maybe you just want to troll them. No, it's a question of accountability. It's a question of they're in a position of power, they should have a point of contact. And it's something that I think is curious and overlooked. I mean, a court of law, a crown court will have a postal address. It might have an email address, but really, there is definitely a barrier there. And I know this from experience. So, one of the many cases that I came across recently was, and this was in Yahoo News, so you might be familiar with it. Drunk driver. He paralyzed two women, a mother and a daughter. On leaving the courtroom, he done the fingers at the press. Now, that to me indicates someone who has no remorse. What was his sentence? A community sentence, a fine, and a 4 year driving ban. 4 years. Now, this is insane because this guy is a repeat offender. He has no or little remorse because I don't think a genuinely remorseful person would be swaggering in front of the press like that. They'd be keeping their head low. They'd be ashamed of themselves. This guy obviously wasn't. He probably put on a big performance for the judge. But, he paralyzed two women. Their lives are changed. No doubt they'll have years of PTSD. He gets, a 4 year driving ban. He'll get back to his car after 4 years. A more appropriate ban would be a custodial sentence because he's a repeat offender. A mandatory alcohol program. He has to take responsibility for that. And a permanent ban. I don't see any logic in a 4 year ban for someone who paralyzed two people. Why 4 years? This is absolutely insane. And I don't know how any legal person could even try to claim that's an appropriate sentence. What logic is there? What actual practical logic, leave aside the moral argument, what practical logic is there in just a 4 year ban? It makes no sense. It really makes no sense. I mean, this is 4 years meant to be the time he might sort himself out? What if he doesn't? And he's still got an alcohol problem after 4 years? Well, then he'll get behind the wheel and he'll kill someone. And their blood will be in the hands of the recorder in that case. It infuriates me. And I know I'm not the only one, because a lot of people responded to that particular report. Another one a few weeks before that, which I think I covered in an individual video, a woman who was having an illegal party during lockdown. When the police came to her place, I think it was in Middlesbrough, um, she bit one of the officers. She bit an officer. Now, during a pandemic, biting anyone's disgusting, but during a pandemic, that's potentially even more dangerous. What was her approach? A suspended sentence, a community sentence. Again, she had no remorse. So this just. She also, by the way, threatened to send heavies round to the officer's home. I just cannot understand what is going on in the head of judges who make those sort of decisions. In her case, it may be because she had young dependents, children. If she's sent to jail, then who looks after them? Okay, but at least in that case, balance it out by giving her a much, much longer community sentence. Force her to attend anger management. Force her to apologise personally to the officer. There's other things that you can do that would be more appropriate, more to that sort of case. Um, I just, I just do not understand what goes on in the heads of some British judges, and I don't really accept this argument. Oh, they're bound by the sentencing guidelines. More often than not, judges err on the lighter side of things. So if they have a certain sentencing guideline and they deliberately go for the lower part of that, that is a choice. That is a choice. So I don't accept this argument. Oh well, their hands are bound. I do think that The government can change this by changing the sentencing guidelines. That comes into the Sentencing Council of England and Wales. If you have a minimum sentence guideline, then it forces judges to issue proper sentences. But anyway, I want to get to what empowerment does the public have? We can write to MPs, we can sign petitions, we can voice outrage, but that is pretty much it as it stands. So, I'm just going to talk a little bit about one approach, although I don't think it's a very effective one. Ask for a Crown Court sentence to be reviewed. This is from UK gov.uk. You can ask for someone's Crown Court sentence to be reviewed if you think it's too low. And I'm just aware of not losing the video here. The Attorney General's Office can review very low sentences given by the Crown Court in England and Wales if they're asked to. Only certain types of case can be reviewed, including murder, rape, robbery, some child sex crimes and child cruelty, some serious fraud, some serious drug crimes, some terror-related offences, some crimes committed because of the victim's race or religion, stalking that caused the victim severe distress or to violence, harassment that caused the victim to fear violence, controlling and coercive behaviour. Now, interestingly, that this doesn't include common assault, which is one of the most common types of crime. That, for example, would be the case in that woman in, actually, it wasn't Middlesbrough, it was Hull, who bit the officer. That case wouldn't be covered under this. Neither would the drink driver, even though he almost killed two women. Why not? Why is reckless driving and common assault not covered? Why not? This is the sort of questions I think should be answered. Anyone can ask for a sentence to be reviewed. You do not have to be involved in the case. Only one person needs to ask for a sentence to be reviewed. You must submit your request to the Attorney General's office within 28 calendar days of the sentencing. Provide as much information you can about the case, like the name of the person who got the sentence, the date the sentence was given, the court where the case was held, the crime committed. And then there's contact details there for the Attorney General. It's a new Attorney General now. I believe his name is, it was Suella Braverman. The current Attorney General, just as a point of reference, is, let me get this up. I believe this is a cabinet position. Michael Ellis. So, in other words, if you see a sentence that you think is outrageously low, you can write to Michael Ellis as the Attorney General. He can then contact the Court of Appeal. But even then, there's no guarantee that it would even be reviewed. So, wait to hear this. The Court of Appeal may decide that the sentence should stay the same, is unreasonably low, called unduly lenient, and may increase it, not will increase it, or refuse to hear the case. Even if a case is passed on to the Court of Appeal, it may not change the sentence. Now, that line to me exemplifies what is so infuriating about the system. Even if a case is passed on to the Court of Appeal, it might not even be appealed. Excuse me, reviewed. Reviewed. Not even asking for it to be changed, to be reviewed. So they might just say, oh, no, we can't be bothered. I'm sure they'll have some legal reasoning for saying that, oh, it's been passed, blah, blah, blah. But there's another side to this. Legal people will, by nature, they're in the legal bureaucracies. They have to. In any trial, there's going to be complexities. There's going to be aggravating factors and mitigating factors. Fine, I accept that. But what they need to accept is the average member of the public is not a legal expert. We can only go on. I consider myself a relatively intelligent guy. I'll be honest, I don't know all the ins and outs of this. I do know that it is very bureaucratic, and I do know that judges and the legal establishment more broadly just isn't really as accountable as it should be. And I think something that doesn't take a rocket scientist to work out, there is undeniably a massive gulf between what the public thinks and what the legal establishment thinks. The Sentencing Council of England and Wales says that the differences aren't that big, and they give examples whereby they have this interactive thing where you can review a case and issue your own sentence. It's an interesting tool, actually. It's quite useful to look at. I don't think they said it. I think it was Department of Justice set that one, and they say, "Oh well, whatever you've decided, looking at the facts and the evidence of this case, that's what was handed out in the actual sentence." Except the examples they give are very limited. There's a lot of other examples that aren't provided there. Like I say, common assault is one of the most common, and it's one that's largely overlooked by the Sentencing Council of England and Wales, and indeed by this source that I've just mentioned. Now, why isn't common assault and reckless driving included there? Why not? How about arson? I would say they're all serious crimes that can ruin lives or even take lives. Um, so what needs to change? Well, I think that judges have to be more accountable. They have to be. I'm not suggesting that we elect them, but I do think there should be more public empowerment to kind of hold a judge to put the profession on the line. I mean, after all, if people think an MP isn't good enough, they can be voted out of office. Now, we can't vote for judges, but in some American jurisdictions you can. I had thought about that idea, but I kind of reflected on it, and it might not work in the UK simply because in certain communities you might, for example, have judges pandering to, for example, Sharia law in Tower Hamlets. Well, we can't have that, a certain, form of Sharia law, but because, people might have a judge elected from that community who is very much of that school of thought. That's probably controversial to even say. But even if we leave aside, God, I can see the woke's getting at me for that one. Um, but there has to be more accountability. I mean, judges are in a position of power. It's unacceptable that they're not answerable to the public. Unacceptable. I think they should have a much more transparent contact point, not for people to harass them, but for people to simply express their displeasure or ask them to justify a sentence. I think they should be obliged to justify a soft sentence if there is sufficient public anger about it. Why should they get to just go and hide in the shadows whilst the long suffering public is seeing justice go out the window? I think it's unacceptable. And again, I draw this analogy with politicians. People complain about politicians, but they do have to face the public in a way that judges don't. Most people do. I mean, if a soldier abuses his or her position, they'll face a court martial. If even police officers are more accountable, and that's not perfect. It's not perfect because they tend to be put on desk duty, but even they are more accountable. There's still rules that they have to abide by. With judges, yes, there's legal protocols, and I'm sure there's rules, but they are not answerable to the public. And I think that's infuriating and it's wrong because they're making decisions that will directly impact the public. This is why. I.e., you have a judge who issues a soft sentence. Who is it that pays for that? It's public. Because if that offender then goes out and continues to commit crime, that is a direct response of a weak sentence because there's been no deterrent. And, in some cases, they haven't been sent to prison. They're a dangerous or violent person. They go out and assault someone. As far as I'm concerned, that's it's their fault primarily, but it's also the judge's fault for making that decision. So I really do think the legal establishment are in a bubble. I do. And they always throw out this legal mumbo jumbo, they use legal language. How about, I would like to see them demonstrating humanity for once, by which I mean actually understanding public anger, actually understanding public sentiments. And I want to be clear about this. I am not saying the public sentiments should be the way that we determine sentencing alone, right? Because we saw what happened in the deep south of the United States when you had lynch justice. I don't want to see that. There has to be due process. All the facts have to be presented. Everyone has a right to a fair trial. I totally get that. So I'm not calling for public lynch mob justice. I am calling for the public to be listened to. That's all. That's hardly unreasonable. It's hardly extreme. And we have, in my opinion, an arrogant legal establishment comprised of judges, comprised of the Sentencing Council of England and Wales, and that whole world. They just don't understand how deeply the public feel. They don't understand the anger, or if they do, they don't care. Because the thing is, law-abiding members of the public are very unlikely to take the law into their own hands. People complain and they get angry and they get depressed over this sort of sentencing. But they know, the legal establishment knows, that we're not really going to do anything about it other than complain. So I think they're complacent. So for that reason, I do think they need a bit of a shake-up. They need a bit of a radical people movement to change this. I'm talking peacefully, but concentrated. Has to change. Frankly, I would even make a radical statement here. I would say that maybe there does need to be more government overlook into our justice system. And I know people will jump on that and say, oh, but what about independence of the legal system from government? Because we're a democracy. Yes, sure. I wouldn't have a situation where politicians, for example, decide what a sentence should be. That should be down to judges. But I do think the government can do a lot more to change the situation. The Conservatives talk tough, but really not that much has changed. We still continue to see pathetically weak sentences. We need a situation where judges are forced to give real sentences. And if they don't, I mean, as it stands, we should have a situation whereby judges who are consistently weak, their job is on the line. That'll shake them up a bit and make them actually be more efficient. Because I think this is ideological. I think there are judges who don't issue stronger, more appropriate sentences because they don't want to add to the prison population. But what sort of way is that to carry out justice? Oh, well, this person's committed this evil, heinous crime, but we better not send them to prison. Prison's overcrowded. Well, the issue of prison overcrowding can be addressed by building more prisons. And, it's not a Dickensian thing. Aren't there more prisons? Aren't there more workhouses? Well, the point here is more prisons actually is a more humane approach because it means that you have less overcrowding, which means that inmates are in better conditions, which means that staff are in better conditions. I have no problem with more prisons being built, and I'm for penal reform. I'm for prison that works effectively, but I am not against the idea of prison. And this is where I strongly, strongly, strongly take issue with some of the liberal left, who, given half a chance, would just discard prison completely. That's insane. It emboldens criminals and it endangers the public. It's insane. And anyone who seriously proposes that should be made to pick up the pieces. The Green Party. I mean, the Green Party, if you look at their manifesto from a few years ago, they were actually talking about getting rid of punishment as a concept. So, yeah, I believe the Green Party, given half a chance, would abolish prison. Sure, they haven't come out and said we're going to do that. But I think if the Green Party were the government, well, God help us. But I think, yeah, I think they would just close all prisons, regardless of how dangerous the offenders are. Um, the Tories, are supposed to be the party of law and order. Priti Patel's a tough home secretary. I think probably if I was to rank her out of 10 in effectiveness, I'd give her a strong 5. She's got some things right, but on her watch, this situation's continued. We haven't seen tougher sentencing. We continue to see weak judges issue weak sentences. But, the Home Secretary is powerful, but she's one person. This is also about collective willpower. It has to change. And if I ever get into public life, I will do what I can to make judges more accountable, to make sentencing more appropriate, and to restore public trust to a sufficient level. I don't think the public will ever be 100% happy. I accept that. I accept that there will always be crime, but as a society, we cannot have a situation where you get people doing terrible things and they're given a tap on the wrist. That's anarchy. Really, it's borderline anarchy because it emboldens criminals. Only this year, I've seen thieves in broad daylight steal things from shops in broad daylight. No fear of justice, no fear of being arrested, just an entitled mentality. And in the grand scheme of things, that's not the most serious crime, but it gives you an idea of the complacency that criminals feel. I want a situation where criminals are frightened of justice. I want a situation where criminals are forced to think twice before ever committing crime again. That would be a system that works. And to me, that is a tougher system. And to the liberal left who say that's all I'm talking about, no. Toughness alone wouldn't be the answer. Yes, I believe in rehabilitation after the sentence, after the penalty has been served. That's the difference with my way of thinking and the way that the liberal left think. They think crime, rehabilitation. I think crime, justice, rehabilitation. That's a fundamental difference. And with rehabilitation, I think that should only be when the offender has shown genuine remorse and when they've served their time. But yeah, that's very important to reduce recidivism. We'll never have a perfect system, and I don't think we're the worst in the world. I mean, Britain's a relatively safe country. We don't have a high homicide rate. We're relatively safe. But we do have a subculture of that's very chilling, where you have teenagers beating fathers to death, standing up for their family. There's something very evil and perverse going on in that situation. Certainly, a lot of it's to do with background. That's why I say not punishment alone. Of course, the background needs to be looked at. I think definitely family stability is a major factor in that. It's not the only factor, but it's one of them. Drugs is a major factor. But these things have been spoken about for decades. One thing's for damn sure, though, after the fact, when a crime has happened, there has to be justice. Will it change the criminal? Will it will it stop overall crime? Maybe not. But it is right in that case. That's the point. You can't say, well, this person's been punched for no reason, for absolutely no reason. That's okay. Well, oh well, the offender has a drug problem, or the offender, um, they came from a broken home. So well, we'll just give them a community sentence and hope they don't do it again. Not good enough. I think gangland violence and gang attacks, particularly of teenagers by teenagers, is one of the most chilling and for me depressing things going on in Britain today, and it happens far too much. Definitely, we need much, much tougher deterrence. Not putting these young thugs in community sentencing is meaningless. They laugh at it. I'd be in favour of scared straight. I really would. I don't take pleasure from it. But when you get a 16-year-old who isn't scared of the police, they're not scared of, you know, beating up a stranger, they need to really be in a position where they are scared of justice. And I think something like scared straight should maybe be taken seriously. It has mixed results when it's been used in the States, but mixed results mean some of it's effective, some of it's not. So look at what works and what doesn't. But I just believe that in this country, there is a lot that can change about our justice system. There needs to be more accountability of judges. There needs to be more appropriate sentencing. There needs to be more honest sentencing. The very idea of a suspended sentence is perverse. So there needs to be more honest sentencing as well. And frankly, I think the whole legal establishment need an almighty shake-up. They need they need to really, really feel public upheaval and anger about this peacefully. Thanks for watching.